You know what happens when your character receives damage? Chances are no, and if you want to learn how it works, follow this video. Exile's PoE Academy here. Damage calculation is not as complicated as it might seem. I will walk you through all steps when players or monsters take damage and comment on how the changes to core defensive mechanics planned for 3.16 might be affecting builds in the new expansion. If you stick till the end, you will learn my go-to trick to distinguish between glass cannons and durable characters. Damage sources such as attacks, spells, secondaries, and damage over time have a base damage that can be increased by various stats. These stats are only applied once in every calculation. The first stat that increases the damage source are local modifiers, that is, for example, most modifiers on weapons and added damage to attacks or spells from your gear or support gems. Damage conversion takes place second. Effects like damage added as modifiers, such as gain a certain amount of physical damage as extra cold damage, are applied, and then conversion takes place. So for example, cold damage converted to fire damage. Third, global modifiers are applied. The keyword increased or reduced indicate that modifiers work additively, while the keywords more and less indicate that modifiers work multiplicatively. It is noteworthy that converted damage can take benefit of bonuses for its initial damage type and the converted damage type. You may have heard of this as double dipping, and it is the foundation of several builds like Penance Brand, Winter Orb, or anything that uses the Eternity Shroud body armor. Last but not least, it is decided whether a hit rolled a critical strike. While all the previous steps take place inside the attacker, we are now turning towards the defender. Before any damage is applied whatsoever, it is checked whether a hit, not a dot, is hitting the defender. Remember that this will be changed in 3.16 and we will discuss it in just a moment. In a nutshell, evasion gives a chance to evade attacks and only attacks, while dodge can apply to both attacks and spells. What's interesting here is that evasion is used this early in the receiving damage chain, while all other three basic defense types appear in step 7 of this chain. This leads to a situation where builds that heavily rely on dodge and evasion as their only source of defense, like most bow builds do, in a all-or-nothing situation, as either you completely avoid incoming damage or take all damage that's coming at you. GGG has planned to remove dodge entirely from the game in 3.16, leaving those builds vulnerable to magic damage, which is why they want to introduce spell suppression. It provides a chance to halve incoming spell damage, and I think that this change will have a big impact on farmer builds using evasion and dodge, as instead of spending some points into acrobatics and phase acrobatics, you will now have to allocate several points into spell suppression, lowering the overall damage potential for these builds. Also, you will receive damage every time you get hit, meaning that ailments can be applied much more frequently than before. We will see how big of a nerf this is, but I'm afraid it will be much more difficult for medium players with little currency to play decent builds on the lower right side of the tree. If a hit hasn't been prevented, the defender gets the chance to shift incoming damage to another damage type. Damage types are physical, fire, lightning, cold, and chaos damage. Shifting damage is not the same as converting damage though. For example, if some of the incoming damage is shifted to or from physical damage, the damage numbers after shifting are used in the armor calculation. Shifting damage can be very powerful, as we will see in the next step, damage mitigation. Damage can be avoided before the actual mitigation takes place. Avoiding damage stops the damage of a hit, but still counts as a hit. Damage wasn't avoided, elemental damage and chaos damage are mitigated by their respective resistance. If not altered, these resistances are kept at 75%, meaning that any incoming elemental or chaos damage is reduced by 75%. Most of the time, it is very easy to reach 75% elemental resistances on a build, which is a must if you want to survive yellow maps or above. The hard cap for maximum resistances is 90%. A similar hard cap applies to physical damage reduction, which is increased by both armor and other sources of flat physical damage reduction like endurance charges or flasks. Until 3.15, you had to invest quite a bit into armor and other physical mitigation sources to reach even 75% mitigation, which is the reason why many builds used to shift incoming physical damage to elemental damage. Let's look at a simple example to explain this concept. Let's say we take 100 physical damage. In one case, we mitigate the damage only by using physical mitigation, and in another case, we shift 15% of the incoming damage to cold damage. You can pause the video if you want to check the math, but we would reduce the incoming damage by 8.75% in this example, which is quite a lot, and shows you why this mechanic is so strong. I personally appreciate the changes that are planned for 3.16 regarding armor. GGG has stated that they want to lower the amount of armor required to mitigate the incoming hit, which is quite nice because it was difficult to build decent physical damage mitigation just by using armor. Think of it as GGG pushing down the yellow and green area in the overview. I feel like this is a buff to most melee builds, as you can allocate more points into your offensive stats rather than defensive stats. Combined with the changes to how auras are reservating mana, also other builds can benefit from this change. The fifth step is straightforward. Any mitigated damage is modified by so-called damage taken modifiers. Flat amounts are applied first, then the sum of all increases and reductions, and lastly more and less multipliers are applied separately. There are various sources of these modifiers in the game. Some prominent examples are Shock, which increases lightning damage taken, Fortify, which lets you take less physical damage, and Arctic Armor, which lets you take less physical and fire damage. After damage has been shifted, mitigated and modified, you might think that a defender would finally receive the damage. Well, no. Attacks and spells can still be blocked in a 7th step. Note that damage over time and a subscription to my channel cannot be blocked, so go ahead and leave a sub if you haven't already. Block chance for both attacks and spells are capped at 75% without any modifications to maximum block chance. Keep in mind that you don't receive any damage from a hit or spell that has been blocked, which also prevents any harmful on-hit effects such as status ailments like Ignite, Freeze, Chill, Shock or others. Block is for sure one of the most powerful defensive mechanics in the game, especially paired with shield mods like Recover, Life, ES or Mana when you block. However, up to 3.15 it was quite difficult for other ascendancies than Gladiator to reach the spell block cap. Making a weaker version of the Gladiator's ascendancy versatile combatant available to all builds is a good thing in my opinion, as it gives more builds the possibility to invest into another defensive mechanic. In the final step, before your life pool takes any damage, you can be guarded by effects that take damage before you. Any Aegis, Guard Skills, Ward, Energy Shield and Might over Matter in this order. Any chaos damage will always bypass Energy Shield except you use a Chevron's wrappings. Damage over time follows the same principle, however, it does not hit, which means that it ignores evasion, damage shifts, armor and other mechanics that require a hit. Other sources of physical damage reduction apply as usual though. As a bonus, I wanted to share a method to identify whether a build has strong defenses. If you find a build that you are interested in, import it to Path of Building. There is an overview on the build's defenses in the Calculations tab. Under Effective Health Pool, you can find an entry for a maximum hit taken. This value indicates how much damage your character could take in one single hit. As a rule of thumb, 15k in physical damage will be enough to tank a Koza Slam in a Simulacrum, which is the hardest single hit a boss can deal as far as I know. However, 10k should make you play the game comfortably. For elemental damage, I aim for at least 30k maximum hit taken each. Maximum hit taken for chaos hits highly depends on the content you want to do, but I try to have at least 10k. Remember that those values are meant to be for characters without any special defensive mechanics for skills. I like to deactivate any guard skills, for example, because you cannot guarantee that they are active whenever you get hit. Depending on the number of defensive layers of your character or its playstyle, you can reduce these numbers by quite a bit. For example, my Stormbrand League Starter for 3.14 could take only 10k physical damage, 25k elemental damage and 6k chaos damage in a single hit, but I haven't really died in red maps due to the safe playstyle of Stormbrand. What do you think about GGG plans for 3.16? Do you agree or disagree with them? Overall, I think GGG is moving into the right direction. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks for staying with me until the end, and see you in the next one.